McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop, Season 3, Episode 6. Something savage this way comes. October 15th, 1921. Continued. Well, diary, as I was saying, I touched the portal. If all went well, and the symbol I'd drawn with Mara's ointment could take me to a different time, then I was about to end up in McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop. My fingers got a little sticky from touching the symbol I'd drawn. It glowed golden. I felt a whisk in the pit of my stomach, and I was transported. I recognized the smell at once. I was on the dusty third floor of the pawn shop, behind a huge stone mask. I took a deep breath and dusted off my knees. I dashed out from behind the stone mask, only to come face to face with a fussy old woman. "Good heavens!" she squawked. "You scared me to death!" I was just as shocked to see her. I stammered out an apology and ran from the room. Oh, no, that wasn't right. The pawn shop never had outside visitors anymore. Was I still stuck in 1916? I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen a non-magic unusual actually shopping in the pawn shop. It never happened, at least very rarely. And people never made it to the third floor. It was a lot of stairs. Usually they got overwhelmed by the first floor and left. I couldn't remember what the woman had been wearing, although, to be fair, most older women didn't like the fashion changes and stuck with what they knew. Had she been wearing 1916 garb? I wish I knew. What time was I in? Was I in the pawn shop of 1921, or was I in the pawn shop of 1916? As fascinating as it would have been to meet everyone who belonged to the pawn shop 5 years ago, I didn't want to talk to that Mr. McGillicuddy. I wanted to talk to the current Mr. McGillicuddy, and I wanted to talk to him now. Out of breath, I hurried to the second floor, to the nail in the wall. I needed to find out as soon as possible where I was. If I was still in 1916, then I had no idea what I would do. I would probably just have to start my life all over again, painstakingly avoiding my 5 years younger self and moving to a different city. I could pick up my adventure where I'd left off, a much older Maud who probably wouldn't remember anyone's names. I reached the second floor. I found the nail that led to the secret basement of McGillicuddy and Murders, and I squeezed it as soon as I found it. I had fitful visions of the wall looking totally different, of the nail being a different color, of everything being wrong and this still being 1916, but in a flash, I'd entered the murder object, and I hurried down the stairs into the secret base. As soon as I entered, I heard chatter and smelled cloves and oranges. Octavia appeared, almost at once. "Maud!" Octavia said. "You know me?" I cried. I threw my arms around her neck. Octavia squeaked and patted my arms. Octavia is one of my new friends, and I love her like the dickens. But I'd never loved her more. I was so elated to see her. The portal had worked. The symbol of the eye could take you to your original timeline. That was new. This was magic unusual technology I'd never heard of before. Maud, why are you panicking? Should I be panicking?" "No," I said. "Oh, Octavia, I've just been stuck in 1916. I was in an absolute dither. It is 1921, isn't it? October?" Yes, Octavia said. "Maud, I just saw you half an hour ago, in the kitchen, when you left with half the cheese. What happened?" "I was stuck in a murder object," I said. "It's a long story. I couldn't teleport out of the murder object because I didn't enter it from 1921. It's very complicated. My head is spinning." "What?" she squawked. "Where have you been? What happened?" "To hell and back, my dear," I said. I heaved a breath. I looked around. "Where is Mr. McGillicuddy?" "Gone," Octavia said. "He heard a rumor of a magic unusual in Sweden who might have a cure for Rath's madness. It's a long shot, and I don't think he was very confident about it. But he left about 10 minutes ago, and he told us not to expect him back for 3 days. 3 days, I said. I leaned against the wall. Mr. McGillicuddy had gone in search of a cure for Rath. That was excellent in the long run. But it meant that in the short run, I couldn't tell him what I'd found. I bit my lip. Mr. McGillicuddy wouldn't have anyone to cure if we didn't rescue Rath from the cave of the Whiskelets. Rath couldn't teleport out, and, as I'd heard the Whiskelets discussing, they wanted to make Rath their 13th number. They wanted to turn him into a plague mask bird. I shivered. I wondered what that entailed, going from human into a Whiskelet. Of course, I'd never seen a Whiskelet without its mask on. Perhaps they were human. Mostly. "Octavia," I said, "I have something I need to do. I have someone I need to rescue. There's no time to wait for Mr. McGillicuddy to come back. I need to act now. This person might be in danger, and they might not have a lot of time. What do you need? Octavia said. Would you come with me? I said. I don't want to go back alone. I need to bring people I trust. I'll come, Octavia said. It's not safe, I said. Doesn't matter, Octavia said. This is what we do. We go conquer the unconquerable. Honestly, I've been a bit bored lately. We're supposed to be quarantined, have you forgotten? But you keep leaving. Miss McGillicuddy just left. Let's just keep an eye out for night enthusiasts. Yes, but please, let's leave. When do you want to leave? Should I go get my hat? I laughed. Hold on for an hour, I think. There's someone I want to talk to before we go. And Scotland. Ask Scotland if she's willing to come. I trust her, and I wouldn't hate having a medic. A medic, Octavia said. That bad, is it? I found the death to all mice beings, I said. They're called whiskelets. They live in this cave that's... I don't even know if it's in our world. I felt like I was on a different planet. I couldn't teleport out of it, but I figured out how to escape, and I think I can get us back into the cave. I think this jelly will work. Hang on, Octavia said. Jelly? You have magic jelly? I have magic jelly, I said. I'll explain how it works later. But keep in mind, we might all muster forces and get ready to enter the cave and then realize that it doesn't work. But I want to be prepared in case the portal does work. Will you ask Scotland? But tell her it's dangerous. Tell her it's the whiskelets and that getting out of there is difficult. But we can get out, Octavia said. Yes, I said. I'll make sure everyone has some magic jelly and a personal murder object before we go in. Can't be too careful. That way, if we get split up, everyone can still make it out. Oh, goody, Octavia said. I've always wanted some magic jelly. Is it mint-flavored? Diary, I was rather wishing that the name Magic Jelly wasn't about to become the official title for Mara's invention, but I was pretty sure it was. Magic Jelly, Magic Jelly. Oh, well, I may as well get used to it. Meet you back here in an hour, I said. Yes, Octavia said, and I'll gather pocket-sized murder objects. Bless you, I said. Octavia dashed off, and I wasn't sure what to do next. I stood there for almost a minute and a half, feeling dizzy and tired, and not sure I had it in me. I finally moved. The first thing I did was run to the kitchen and grab a ham sandwich and a copious amount of potato salad. I ate half the sandwich on my way to the front door. Then I held the potato salad in one hand and the ham sandwich in another hand, and I left the secret basement. As soon as I was out, still eating enthusiastically, I might add, I teleported to the cemetery where I'd last found Noble James. It was a beautiful day, sort of peaceful and grey. I felt a compulsion to lie down in the wet leaves and stare up at the sky and just feel things for about 3 hours. I wondered if other people felt that way, the wish to just eject themselves from life for a little bit. I used to have nothing to do, nothing to care about, and now I had so much it was coming out of my ears. It would be nice to simply pause and forget about everything except for the cold stickiness of rain. Even now, living my best life, I sometimes wish I could stop being myself. Not forever, of course. Just for a little while. It's so exhausting to be alive, isn't it, Diary? So rewarding. But ye gods, sometimes you just need to lie under a tree and forget your own name. But I digress. I was at the cemetery to find Noble James, if I could. As much as I would have loved to hide under a tree, I did not have the time. I hurried to the crypt where I'd first run into him, and I hoped against hope that he'd left some kind of sign for me, some way to find him again. But did Noble James want me to be able to find him again? He was pretending to be dead. He didn't even want Mr. McGillicuddy to know he was alive. He wanted to vanish. The chances of him leaving any kind of message for me were slim. Just because I knew his secret didn't mean we got together regularly for toast and kippers. He had probably absconded, and I would never see him again. Well, maybe I'd see him again in about 4 years, but I wished I could see him now. I opened the door of the crypt. The handle was cold, and it pricked me. The chill shot up the veins of my arm, and I felt the temperature of my blood change. I shivered, and I felt like something evil and ugly was watching my back. I looked behind me, but I didn't see anything moving in the cemetery. Certainly just my overactive imagination, then. I stepped into the crypt, and I realized why I must have felt so shivery. This crypt led down into the night enthusiast's prison. That must be why I had the creeps. I'd almost forgotten that little detail. One of these days I was going to forget something really important and wind up dead. Why on earth would Noble hang around the entrance to the night enthusiast prison? He wanted the night enthusiasts to believe absolutely that he was dead. He didn't want to accidentally run into one. I was being ridiculous. There was no way he would have left a message here for me. We'd gone on one adventure together, and it had been wonderful. But now he had to go his own way, and I had to go mine. I found myself getting sad, wistful. I found myself wanting to spin on my heel and sigh, and then write sad poetry for an hour. Did I still have the swoons for Noble James? The very idea made me feel silly. Still, he did have that poetic, quiet air about him. And it was enough to drive a girl mad, really. And he was an excellent adventure companion. All women should drag their men onto adventures before they decide about matrimony. All the same, as delightful and funny as falling in love would have been, I felt something holding me back. Almost as if I had feelings for somebody else. Maybe those feelings were for me. Maybe I had fallen head over heels for myself, and I didn't want to break up the party. I don't know. At any rate, I was sad. I'd felt connected to Noble deeply, and I hated to think of him being gone, beyond my call. I prepared to step into the crypt, to take a look around and, just in case, check for secret messages from Noble. Before I did, I looked over my shoulder. I wanted to make sure no one would see me going into the crypt, so I quickly scanned the cemetery. And I saw a person. There was someone there. There hadn't been a moment before. My skin crawled. Was I being followed? Had the person been hiding behind a tree seconds before? I squinted. It was a small woman, dressed in purple, with a round face. From here, she seemed to be wearing fairly striking eye makeup, like her eyes were hooded and dark. I twitched, and I had a premonition. It looked like Don Mamungus. It wasn't possible, of course. Don Mamungus, the leader of the night enthusiasts, was locked up in our prison. There was no way she had escaped. If she had escaped, she wouldn't be stupid enough to stand in a graveyard and let me stare at her. The more I stared at this strange woman, however, the more I felt like it must be Dawn. I could feel it in the hollow of my bones. It looked like her exactly, from this distance. And why was she just standing there, staring back at me? I picked up my skirts and ran across the cemetery. I expected Dawn to run away or teleport, but she didn't. She just stood there, staring, as if she couldn't even see me. I stumbled to a halt halfway there and panted. Why wasn't she running? Was she in some kind of trance? Why was she standing there like a dead china doll? I realized I could teleport right beside her, before she had a chance to zap out of the cemetery. I reached her side in a flash, and I grabbed her hard by the wrist, so she couldn't teleport away from me. But as soon as I touched her, I knew that something was wrong. This wasn't Don Mamungus. This wasn't even a human being. Her skin was cold. Her flesh was soft. Almost as soft as human muscle, but ever so slightly softer, to where things felt uncanny. That slight difference in the feel of the flesh was worse than touching something liquid or stone, something shockingly different than what I expected. The difference was just barely there. My fingers sunk in further than they should have. I felt like I'd touched a dead, rotting rat, and I jerked my hand away. But it was Don Mamungus. Now that I was standing right in front of her, I could see it was her, perfectly. She stared at me out of dull eyes. "Dawn?" I said. She didn't say a word. She didn't try to teleport, either. What are you?" I said. She continued to stare. I found myself walking to look behind her, as though I would see a mechanism, as though she was a wind-up toy with gears like a clock. I walked around her, slowly, but she slowly circled too. She kept looking at me. She moved around so that no matter where I went, she had her eyes on my face. It became a kind of grisly game. I wondered if she was hiding something behind her back. I ran, like a child at the playground, trying to dodge until I could see the back of her neck. She moved faster too, so fast. I realized she could move as fast as she wanted to. Lethargic disposition nonetheless. "You're not Don Mamungus, are you?" I said. "What are you?" The thing stared at me. I didn't know what to do. Mr. McGillicuddy was out of town. Could I take this thing captive? It moved like something with incredible strength. If we got into a fist fight, it would win. Still, if it was evil, and not human, and wore the face of Don Mamungus, I didn't want it wandering around on its own. "Will you come with me?" I said to the thing. I took a few steps back. I felt like I was luring a sheep with a handful of hay. The thing watched me. "Come on, a little closer," I said. "Come follow me, that's it." The thing took a step closer to me. I should have been elated because my plan was working, but I was scared out of my wits. I suddenly felt like I was being chased. "That's it," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "Come follow me." My plan was to lure it into the crypt and then leave it there. A flimsy plan, to be sure, because I didn't know if this thing could teleport like a magic unusual or not. But still. If I penned it in like a chicken, ran back to the secret base for some reinforcements, and then came back, it might still be here. And then we could take it to our prison and find out what it was. What was it, though? Imagine bringing an animal into your home, only to realize it had a deadly disease. This thing could be anything. It could, in theory, do anything to us. What if it could melt a human's bones just by looking at them? Honestly, my imagination runs away with me sometimes. But I was suddenly scared to trap it. What if it infected us all somehow? What if we shouldn't go anywhere near it? Just as I was wondering, the thing vanished. I screamed. I actually did, right out loud in the middle of the cemetery. It had scared me to death. I felt like it had rushed me, teleported behind me, teleported right into me. I spun around, but the thing was nowhere. It had left. Like a magic unusual, it could teleport. Wonderful. Now it could teleport right beside me in the middle of the night. Just what I needed. Of course, it couldn't actually teleport beside me, not unless it found a way into the murder object that hid our secret base. But yuck, I think I'm going to be skittish forever. I strode back towards the crypt, feeling shaken. I was filled to the brim with burning questions. What was that thing I'd just seen? I felt like it was an evil omen. As if I needed anything new to worry about. I had several burning questions now. Namely, who had drawn that eye symbol into the wall? Someone had lured me into the cave of the Whiskalets on purpose. I had stumbled across the eye symbol and been transported. I was fairly certain now that that eye had been drawn with Mara's magic jelly. Who had put it on the wall of the secret basement for me to find? How had it gotten there? Who had wanted me to discover that cave? Full of questions, as seems to be my lot in life, I opened the door to the crypt and stepped back inside. I was still shaken and not paying close attention to my surroundings, but I suddenly noticed something in the far corner. It was a small skull, probably from a skunk or an opossum. Most people entering this crypt would probably think that the animal had just died here and ignore the skull. But the skull reminded me of something. It reminded me of the magic unusual from Germany who had removed my and Noble's souls for 24 hours. I wondered if Noble had left it here for me, as a clue. I strode across the crypt, swept up the skull, and sure enough, there was a slip of paper tucked inside the bowl of the skull. I felt giddy. Noble had left me a clue. He wanted me to be able to find him. I was so relieved. I'd wanted so badly to have him on this adventure. For one thing, he owned a gun, which was useful. For another, he'd already risked a lot for me, and the honest truth was that I trusted him more than anyone else in the world. I didn't want to let him go. I wanted to solve this Whiskalid adventure with him. Feeling buoyant, expectant, at the chance to find him again, I plucked the note out of the skull and unfolded it. As soon as I read the words, my heart sank. "Dear Maud," the note said, "I am praying that you find this because I am in danger, and I need your help. Please look for a second note from me at the corner of the house where we went to see our friend with all the skulls. Hurry if you can. I hope I'm not dead by the time you find me. Noble James." We hope you've enjoyed Season 3, Episode 6, Something Savage This Way Comes, of McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop is written and performed by Minerva Sweeney Wren. All rights reserved. Friends, your troubles are over. Obviously, all your life you've been wanting a giant rubber duck to hang your hat on. Obviously, because then the giant rubber duck would look like it was wearing your hat. I am pleased to tell you that... Hang on. Are you hearing an advertisement right now for giant rubber duck hat stands? You are not. Do you know why? Because this podcast is free and always will be. This podcast is advertisement free and always will be. However, there is a unique opportunity awaiting you if you become a $1 patron. Minerva Sweeney Wren hopes to start a second podcast called The Dark and Decrepit Planet of Spin, where instead of merely listening each week, you will solve real puzzles and make real choices that determine the outcome of the tale. Think of it as an enormous collaborative storytelling adventure. For more information, please go to patreon.com/SweeneyWren. Please consider sharing this podcast with your friends. A post on the audio drama subreddit, an in-person recommendation, or a social media share do more to market this audio drama than anything Minerva Sweeney Wren can do on her own. She relies on you. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop will continue with Season 3, Episode 7, The Way to Hell.